Hello, welcome to African Step Girl. Today we are going to build a stopwatch. Majority of us have actually stopwatches in our phones and our laptops. You can be able to access it via the browser. So a stopwatch mostly have the feature where you can be able to start a timer, stop it, and even reset. They're very popular in being able to track maybe the time you have taken in doing a particular task and so much forth. So let us go ahead and build it. In this video, I'm only going to do the HTML and the CSS part. I had already recorded another video where you will be able to interact with the JavaScript part. So we are going to code up to the HTML and the CSS part, and then feel free to find the part 2 in still our YouTube channel where you can be able to add the JavaScript code. So let us go ahead and start building this stopwatch. So I have opened up my browser. Let me make sure I share my screen. So we have our browser here, and we are going to open up VS Code Dev, and here we will be able to build our stopwatch. So for those who do not know what the stopwatch is, if I just come here and type stopwatch, I'm going to see something like this. So I can just start the timer, and if I wanted to stop, maybe if I'm running a lap, or I want to see how fast maybe I type or how fast I talk, I can be able to type myself, and then once I'm done, I'll just click stop. I can reset to restart it from the beginning. So we are also going to build something like that. Ours is just going to look slightly different from that, just based on how I added the styling. So let me show you how ours is going to look like. So ours is going to look like this. We are going to, you can click start to start your stopwatch. You can reset it, start it again, and you can stop it. Okay, so we are going to be able to add all those functionalities. So let us let us get right on it. So the first thing, I am going to come to my desktop. Not that. So I'll come to my desktop, and the first thing I will do, so for those who are using Windows, you just click on the yellow icon at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to access your files, and you can go to the desktop and start creating a new folder. At the top, you can see a plus sign written new, or you can right click just like I have, and I'll just type stopwatch. So like I have said, in this video, I'll do the HTML and the CSS. I had already done another video with the JavaScript side. So I will upload it immediately after, so that you can just finalize watching the whole video. So the next thing, I'm just going to open the folder, or you can finalize the project. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you build. So feel free to share so that I can be able to see what you have been able to do. So I'll just click on count. So ours is stopwatch. I'll open it. So I'll just cancel this welcome. Yes, view files. And now we have our folder. Wait, it did not open. Let me do that again. I go to desktop, click on Stopwatch, open. Yes, I do trust the authors. And here we have our folder. So I will right click on it and just click new file and create my index.html file. Yes, save changes. I will also okay, I can just come back again to Stopwatch, right click and create my style.css file. I will click again and create my script.js file. So just by looking at these extensions, an extension or a file extension is any wordings you see after this dot. And most of the files that we have do have these extensions. For documents, you mostly maybe find .docs, .pdf. For images, it is .png, .gpg. For videos, it is .mp4. So these file extensions allow us to know the type of file we are dealing with. So currently we have a .html, which references where we are going to write our HTML code. We have a .js, which shows us where we are going to write our JavaScript code, and our style.css, which shows us where we are going to write our styling. So I'll come here to my HTML and I will start with what we call the doc type declaration. So this declaration is very important because it tells the browser where to locate the HTML file. So I would like to say, think of the HTML like the structure of a house. You normally start with building the structure of the house. So if I come here and I just type structure of the house, we'll see that we'll see different structures. So for example, there's so many structures, as you can see. So this is an unfinished house, and just by looking at this structure, I can see that there'll be 4 floors: the ground floor, the first floor, the second floor, and the third floor, or the roof. You can even say there are 2 floors. But just like building a house, you have to start with the structure. So anytime the browser loads a website, it normally starts by loading up the structure. So here we have this icon which looks like 2 pages on top of each other. I'll just click on it to hide these files when I am done. So the doc type HTML is where it's the line of code that guides our browser where to locate our HTML file. So after that, I will write my HTML tag. So this is the tag that allows us to be able to enclose our HTML code. It's just very similar to like putting a walls around the house. So everything that you're going to do with relation to that house is done inside those walls. So the same thing, HTML allows us to be able to enclose our HTML file. So our HTML file is normally divided into 2. It's divided into what we call the head and the body. So mostly the head will contain information that our website visitors cannot see. It will have some information that the website visitors can see, but majority of it cannot be seen by website visitors. It's actually written for the Google's for the search engines. So there are different types of search engines that are there. So you want, if somebody is looking for the word countdown, for example, like we had just done, countdown, or stopwatch, you want your website to be among the websites that are displayed in your search engine results. So as you can see, there are multiple websites that have the stopwatch feature. So this is only possible because of the information that the people who built the website provided inside the head, so as to make the their website to be visible for search results. So it's really important the words that you're writing inside your website. There should be words which are at least grammatically correct and words which actually describe what the website does. So to add that information for the search engine is normally added inside what we call meta tags. Um, I I will do a separate video on meta tags. Actually, I was to do one right now, but I have just lost some things. So yeah, but for now, let us focus on adding the title of our website. So the title is what users see when they are moving from one tab to another. So here at the top, like for example, here you can see the word countdown. So to add that title, which is normally important because if, for example, I was on Netflix, and I open up YouTube as well. So you can see here at the top of the browser, I'm able to move from one part to another because of that title. So that is what we are going to add, because right now, if we launch our website, what do we actually see? Let me launch it. So I'll go inside the folder that we created, Stopwatch. I'll go to index.html, right click on it and click open with Google. So right now at the top for this website, I'm only seeing index.html. So imagine if all this was written index.html, and majority of us actually do not close our tabs as we open them. It will be very overwhelming to find the website we are looking for. So to do the right thing, it's normally good to add the title, and this small icon is known as a favicon, so it's also good to add it. So I'll come here and I'll write title, and I will write stopwatch, and I'm now going to add this image that I'm calling a favicon. To add it, you'll just add it using a link tag, but we do not have any image. We do not have any images that file that we have added here. So you have to first get an image. So I'm just going to come here to my browser again and just look for an image of a stopwatch that I can use as my favicon. So I'll come here to images. So I'll just find one. I think this is okay. It might not per se, this is literally an image. It might not look like an icon. Maybe I can type, yeah, even this is okay. Yeah, this is actually perfect because it looks like an icon. So I can right click on it and say copy image address, and then I will just go to background remover. As you can see, there is a white background around it, and I do not want it to come with that background. So what I will do is I'll go to a new tab and just type background remover. So when I go to background remover, the first thing I'll do is I'll go to where it's written URL, and I will click on it. I will paste the link to that image. So remember, I once I found the image, I right clicked and went to copy image address. So that is the link that I have pasted here. So as you can see, it has removed my background. So I can download it now. So once I have downloaded it, for you to add this image here, you cannot add it just as an image. Like I have said, it is known as a favicon. So I have to add it with the file extension that is needed. What do I mean? If I go to downloads, I will find the image has been added here. In fact, let me move it from here to desktop to where my files are. Let me put it inside Stopwatch. So if I go inside Stopwatch, I'll find this image. But as you can see here, it is a .png. So if you want that image to appear at the top of your browser, you should change it from a .png to what we call a .ico. So I'll come here and I say convert png to ico, and then I'll click on it. And then I will choose the file and I will upload it. So I have moved it to the desktop inside my folder. So here it is. So we have to change it to .ico. So to change it, you come here where it's written to images and you choose .ico, and then I convert it. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes to finish downloading. And I'll click download. Okay, so I'll find this inside my downloads. If I go to my downloads, I'll find that .ico. I will drag it and move it inside. Okay, I've accidentally clicked on it rather than dragging it. So I'll drag it and put it inside the desktop. So I'll put it inside the stopwatch. So inside the stopwatch, I'll delete the .png. I no longer need it. Move to trash. And then here, this image has now been added as a .ico. So I'll come back to my Visual Studio, click on these files, and right click where this image is to rename it. So I'll rename it as logo, or I can just call it favicon. So remember I said that image that you see here at the top of the browsers is normally known as a favicon. So that is what we are adding. So because this is a file on its own, I have to connect it to the index.html. So I connect it using the link tag. So I'll come and say href favicon.ico. And then we have the favicon. I'll write type to be image /x icon, and I will now say rel, the relationship is that this is an icon. So now if I refresh my browser, I expect, remember it was just index.html. So now I expect to see the word stopwatch and that favicon being added. Great. I can see the title has been added and the icon as well. So we can say that we have successfully we can now successfully distinguish between the different websites that are here. Let me send the link to this remove BG in the chat section so that you can be able to easily find it and use it. And I'm also going to send this file for converting so you can be able to easily convert your files. Great. So there you have it. You can be able to now see those files, and you can be able to see where you can be able to remove your background, and you can be able to convert your file. So let me just remove them for now. We won't need them again. So the next thing we're going to do is to now start our project in our body, or have our users now see something. As you can see, we can't see anything. It's a white space because we have not added any code in the body tag. So that is what we are going to do next. So I'll come here and write div And inside this div, I'm going to create, so a div is basically a container. Think of how you normally have, you can have like a container in your house that stores cookies. Anytime you want a cookie, you go to that container. Anytime you want to add a cookie, you go to that container and stuff like that. So the same thing in programming, or in HTML in particular, if you want to add containers where you can be able to group elements together, or to be able to add your code to be in one container, you use the div. So I'll come here and add just another div, and this div will be just for showing me the time display. So I'll just say 00, no, 00.00, not point but full colon. I am going to use it like that. So I have that, and I'm going to add another div inside the other div. So I have a main div that you can see, this is the opening and this is the closing. So in the first part, I've added a div that shows me the timer. So here I'm going to add a div that will have 3 buttons. The first button is stop. The second button is start. And the third button is reset. Okay, so we have those 3 buttons. Let us see how it looks like so far. So if I refresh, I can see some buttons here. They're not looking so good. If I zoom out, it just looks like that. It's very plain, very straightforward. It's not looking so good. So to add styling, and this is literally just what HTML does for us, it just adds the structure. It allows us to be able to add different parts of the website. So here we have added the timer, we have added the buttons. So we now need to style it to make it look good. So that is where CSS comes in place. We already created a style.css file. So all I need to do is connect that file to my HTML file. So I'll come here and I'll say link href to be style.css, the type to be text CSS, and the rel, which stands for relationship, to be style sheets. Yes, so now we have been able to connect our HTML to our CSS. So I'll just click on this icon, which looks like 2 pages on top of each other, so that I can no longer see those files and I just focus on my workspace. So the first thing I want to change is the background color. So I prefer working with dark mode. So I'll just come here and say body. So remember, the body is where our users see. It's what our users see. So remember, before, when we did not have anything in the body, this page was just literally white. So that is what we are changing the background color. So I'll come here and then go to color picker. I'll click on it. And I'll go to just pick a particular. So when you're adding a color in CSS, you can add a color in various ways. You can just name black. I can come here and just write background color. I can come here and just say background color to be black. And if I go to my browser and refresh, it automatically changes to black. But sometimes this is considered too dark. So people normally pick different shades of black, but it's not too dark. And you can use hexadecimal value. So these are normally 6 random. Sometimes it's a mixture of words and letters, but they're normally 6. So we call it, here it's written hex, but in full it's hexadecimal. That is RGB, CMYK, HSV, and HSL. So it's whatever you want. But using this color picker gives me an option to be able to really customize my color and to pick different shades of a color. So like I can pick different shades of black. I can pick different shades of green. So I'll just copy this. So you move this circle till you find the color that you feel you are comfortable with. And once you do that, no, that's too dark for me. So once you do that, just copy that and go and paste it. I'll remove the black now and just paste it. So now let me refresh. So it's not too dark, but it's still in the dark mode. But right now, I can't see the zeros that I had. Why? Because they were black in color. Whenever you add a text in HTML, by default, it's normally added as black. So I can come here and write color. So I can write white, but sometimes I feel like white is too strong and you may just want something like a little bit of shade of white. So you can come here and just choose a particular shade of white. So okay, I think I can stick with that. I'll copy that and I will put it here. So something that's not too white, but you know, it's just there. So I can leave it at that. If you look at it now, we can see I'm trying to zoom out because we also want to style how these things are positioned, this text and these buttons. So let me just zoom in once more to its original size, or I can just refresh. 100, yeah. So I will now try and position it to the middle of the page, horizontally and vertically. To make that possible, I will use what we call the display attributes. And the first thing is that I'll say this display for the body to be flex. And immediately I say it is flex. This is what you will notice. Okay, display to be flex. I thought we would say something. It has not yet changed, but it's okay. So the first thing I'll change is I'll give this like I would try to align this to the center. So to align it horizontally, we normally use justify center. So justify content. So I'll come here and say justify content to be center. And what this will do is it will immediately align the items to the center of the web page, but horizontally. So how do we make it align vertically? The first thing you need to do is to define the height of this body. So I want to tell it the height should be 100 VH. VH means vertical height in full. You can write percentage. Oh, I have written 1100. So that will mean the whole width, because if you just can't assume that the code knows that you mean the whole page. You have to specify that no, my body is actually occupying everything. So that is what I have done. So now the next thing is I'll now make it to align vertically. To make it be aligned vertically, we normally write align items center. So if now I refresh, yeah, it is now aligned to the center of the page, both vertically and horizontally. So yeah, so that's it up to that point. So I'll come ahead now, and inside this container, this div, as you can see, there are so many divs. So you have to add what we call a class name, so that when you are styling something in particular. If you decide to paint a house and somebody just gives you paint and tells you go paint house, there are so many houses around you. They need to be specific which house they want to go. So mostly we find most buildings nowadays normally have a name, so they can be like, yeah, go to maybe whatever Highlands building. So here I'm going to give it a class so that I can be able to uniquely identify this, and I'll call this stopwatch. Okay, so after I call this stopwatch, now I can go ahead and style this accordingly. So to style something that you have given a class name, stopwatch, for example, I'll come here and I'll say dot stopwatch. So this will allow me to be able to style that element. And then I'll say the display should be flex, and the flex, so let us see if what I wanted to show you will appear here. Yes. So the moment I said the display to be flex, everything was next to each other, was aligned on one line. So to make sure that does not happen, you normally come after saying the display to be flex, you say flex direction to be column, so that they are on top of each other. So now it is back to the original settings. So the next thing I will say is I'll give this also a height. So I can say the height, I want it to be 200px, and the width, I want it to be 450px. So if I look at this, I won't see much, or let me align it also to the center. As you can see, immediately I did it has moved away from being in the center of everything. So I'd say justify. But before I do that, let me explain something. We cannot see those height and width we have defined. To be able to see them, let us add a background color that's also a shade of black, but maybe not too black. So I can not to match the black we already have in the background. So I believe the black we already have is 28 something something. So I'll just scroll here and try and find a shade of black that's not too black. I can pick that. So pick whichever color you feel you want. So now I can clearly see the dimensions that I have just created, which is good. So we can see all this content that we have here has aligned itself to the top left. So we want it to be in the middle. To do it, we're just going to do the same thing we did with the body. We're going to come and say justify content to be center, and align items to be center as well. So if I refresh, yeah, there it is. We have it aligned to the center accordingly. So the next thing that I am going to do is I am going to try and make the corners of this div to be a little bit curved. So I'll come here and I will say border radius. I'll give it a value of like 12px. So if I refresh, I can see that we can see some radiuses. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to add a shadow, and in one of the videos I've really talked about how to add what we call box shadows. I will just also talk about it here. However, I do have a really good resource on box shadow, so just add your link, your email to the chat section, and I'll make sure that you get it. Let me this is not showing what I want, but there is a page that has good information. So here I'm going to, yeah, this. So at least this has some visualization. So these are what we call box shadows. It's just adding a shadow. As you can see, you normally define the horizontal and the vertical. So this is the box shadow, the horizontal value and the vertical. And we have after that, you can add the color that you want the box shadow to be. By default, it will be black. And then after that, you can add a blur effect. To add that blur effect, you add it after you have specified the horizontal and the vertical. So I would say this to be 5px. Now that is the blur value. So, and then the color, you can also specify the spread. So the spread is how wide you want that shadow to be. So if you put a negative value, it will decrease the size, and a positive value will increase. So in this case, they have added this is the vertical, the horizontal, and then the blurriness, and then this is the spread, and then the color. And then after that, we have what we call the inset. This is when the shadow moves from the outside to the inside, and you just do that by specifying at the end it should be inset. By default, it will be outset, or just the normal shadow we have seen. So this is just adding multiple shadows, and how that can be done. So yeah, so this is just different shadows that can be added accordingly. So let us go back. Let us go back to our project and actually add a shadow. So I'll come here and I'll say box shadow. Sorry, box shadow. I will say I want it to be 0, then 8px, and then I want it to have a blur of 20px, and I can say the color to be, so I already have a color, so I'm just going to add that, but I have shown you how to look for a color. So you can look for a color that you feel like you want and add it. This from the color picker. So if I look at it now, let me see how it looks like. Okay, so it's a little bit blue in color, which is almost what I want. Let me change this background color because this is not the original background color I wanted. So remember, CSS is it's really determinant on what you want. So whatever you want is whatever you will have. However you want something to look like. Yeah, so I want it to be a little bit darker, and then this to be blue in color. So let us now move on. So the next thing we can do is just add some, okay, we really don't need a padding, we can leave it like that, but we can add a padding. So a padding is the space around a text. Right now it might not seem as if we need it, but we need it, and we will edit it accordingly. So currently we just mean this space around here, around this text, should be 10px from the edges of the container. Okay, so that is our stopwatch. So the next thing I am going to do is I come and give this display here that shows the number also a class, so I can be able to style it. So I'll call this timer display. So what I can come and do is now style it accordingly. So I'll come here and I'll say dot timer display. We have the first thing we can start with is, because we want to put some space between how this timer is and the buttons, we can add what we call a margin bottom at the bottom of the timer. What this will do is will add some space between the timer and the buttons because they're literally next to each other. So if we want to add a space from one element to another, because this is in its own div and the buttons are in their own div, so we can add a margin. So if we come and refresh, this is how it looks like. At least now we have some space. So the next thing I can do is I can come and add some font size to make it look bigger, it's a little bit small, and so forth. But before that, I really found a font that I personally liked. So I'll just go to Google Font. Before I go so far, let me make sure that I send this resource for the box shadow in the chat section, so you can be able to also visit it and understand it better. So Google Fonts, and I'll be able to look for a particular font. So I found a font that looks almost like a digital watch display, and it was this one, Dotto. But if there is any font you like there, this is just a way for you to see the different fonts that are there and make use of them. So I'll click Get Font. I'll click Embed Code. So there are two options. You'll find link. So link is adding it from the CSS, from the HTML side, also import, you can add it. You see it tells you embed code in the head of your HTML. So this is in CSS, but you add it on your HTML side. However, I want to add it on my CSS side. So what I'll do, let me just click copy code here. It's easier. I will come to the top of my CSS file and I will paste it, but I will remove these style tags so that I just remain with the at import. Okay. So that is what we have. So by that, we have automatically been able to import that file. So to be able to make use of it, wait, what has happened? Did it? No, I wanted it to import this one. Which? Oh, I accidentally imported the wrong file. It has imported Poppins, but I wanted or it has imported .1. Let me confirm here. Yeah, it is okay, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll come, but why does it give me? First of all, I do not understand why it has. Okay, let me just go back. I don't think I clicked the wrong one. Oh, I should have clicked Doto here. I clicked Poppins by mistake. So I'll click Get Font and make sure I get it. Wait, did I? Embed code. Get font. Why does it keep giving me the Poppins option? Oh, yeah, it is. So just scroll down, you'll find CSS, Doto CSS class for variable style. So it gives you more information on how to use it. So to use it, I wanted to show you this so that even if you pick another font, you know where to find. So you make sure you're in the Doto part. So I'll click font family. This will allow me to be able to add my font as I want. So I'll come here to the timer display and I'll add it. So if I refresh, I should now be able to see that font. It's there. It's not that visible. So the other thing we can do is make it bolder. So here they have said the weight user value from 100 to 900. So font weight is what allows us to be able to add the boldness of a font. So I'll come here and I'll say font weight. And I'll change that to like 700. So they told me I can use any value between 100 to 900. So, sorry, I'll refresh that. So I can see now it's a little bit bolder, but it is still very small. So I'll come here and I will increase the font size. So I can set the font size to be like 50 px. So if I refresh, yeah, so that's not so bad. It's a little bit bigger. It is more visible. If you want it to be way bigger, there's no problem. You can go ahead and add. So let me just send you the link to these fonts. I don't know if it will send you to Doto, but I have shown you how to find it. Yeah, so just make sure when you're adding, you take note of the font that you are using. Okay, so I also sent the box shadow so that you can be able to find it accordingly. Okay, so let us, we have finished up with the timer display. The next thing is I'm going to give these buttons of mine so that I can style them. I can give them also a class and I will call them timer buttons. So I'll come here to my style.css and I'll say dot timer buttons and I will go ahead and add some styling, some common styling that will be on all buttons. So I can say the display. Sorry, I've had something. I was wondering what that is. The display to be flex. This should be a full colon here. And we should have the gap. So if I say the display to be flex, you will automatically notice that there is no space in between them. So to put some space, I'm going to come again and say gap to be 20px. So what that now will do is it will add some spaces in between them, which we will definitely need. So let us now, we have 3 buttons inside the timer buttons class. We have 3 buttons. So I'll come here and I will say, let me style all those buttons. If I have some styling that I would want them to share. So I'll say dot timer buttons. I'll say button because that is the element tag. So I don't need to give them a class. I can just say dot timer buttons, anything that is inside timer button and is a button, style it this way. So that is actually literally what I am saying. So I'll come here and I'll say have a padding, or we can say 20px. And we can say add, remove any border that might appear in that button. Let me see how that looks like so far. So at least it's now a little bit bigger. We can make these corners to have some curve. We do that by using border radius, and we give that border radius a size. And the next thing is we can work on the font size, just to make it a little bit bigger, so it will look now like this. So that's it. So at least now our corners are not sharp, they're a little bit curved, and we have increased the size of our text. So the next thing I want us to do is to give these buttons their own classes, so we can add more styling to them. So I'll call this class, and I will say this is start button, and give this a capital D. And I can give this a class. Oh no, this is stop button. Stop button, and this one I can give it start button, and this one I can give it reset button. Reset button. So now I will style them so that they can have at least different colors, and when we hover on them, we see something different. So I'll come here and I'll say dot start button to have a particular background color. So this is just a background color that I picked from the color picker. Feel free to find a color that you want. And then so this is now how it looks like. So it's blue, but I want, if I hover on it, something to actually look slightly different. So I'll say hover, and we can say this, when I hover on this start button, I want it to be a lighter shade of blue that almost looks like white, but really is not white. It's not fully white, let me say that. So if I refresh, I see that I can see it's a little bit now changing to light blue. So let me do the same for the stop button. I give it its own color. So I'll come ahead and say background color. I'll give it some shade of red. Just writing red felt too loud for me. So I can just copy all this and now write the hover. So the stop button now will change to a lighter shade of red. So we can have this being EBA 0AD. So these are just some colors I had already found, so that when I hover on it, it changes to that shade of, so it looks like almost a pink, but you know, whatever you want. So the next one is now the reset button. I'll give this a particular background color. I'll give it hashtag 2D7D51. I'll copy this and I'll give it now a hover value, and I will go ahead and give it a particular shade. Of green. So I chose green for the reset. So we have now those three buttons that are there. So guess what? We are done with the CSS and we are not done with the HTML. So the next thing is the JavaScript. I had already done a video with the JavaScript, but I think we can be able to do it here. There is no problem. So I'll just continue. So JavaScript is what will allow us to be able to click on these buttons and actually making something happen and seeing a response. Yeah, and that is what we call interactivity. And that is the whole point of JavaScript. It gives us an opportunity to have interactive websites, websites that respond to us when we click on it and stuff like that. So that is what I want us to do. So the first thing, to be able to make a website interactive, you have to find a way where you can be able to access the HTML elements from the JavaScript side. So the first thing I have to do is connect those two files. Currently, the JavaScript side and the HTML side, they are not aware that they exist. HTML is not aware that JavaScript file exists, and JavaScript is not aware that HTML file exists. So because HTML is what has the structure, we connect the JavaScript side, the JavaScript file on the HTML side. So I'll come here to the body tag. Right before the closing body tag, I will add it there. So it's normally good to add it right above the closing body tag. So I will add using the scripts tag, and I will say src, meaning source. So you put the name of your JavaScript file exactly as it is. So I write script.js. So now we have been able to connect our HTML to our JavaScript side. So now how can I be able to now start getting the files from the HTML side on the JavaScript side? So to do that, we normally use what we call variables. Variables are memory locations that allow us to store different values. For example, we can have a cookie container. So this cookie container gives us an opportunity to be able to store cookies. There can be different cookies, the same type of cookies, but as long as it's a cookie, we store it there. If you want a cereal container, we store our cereals in a cereal container. So variables in JavaScript give us an opportunity to be able to connect our HTML to our CSS file. And it allows us to variables in JavaScript allow us to create memory locations that store different values. And the values we're going to store here is the HTML elements that we want to add interactivity. So the first thing is, I want to add interactivity to this display, so that when I click start, I am able to manipulate the numbers that are shown here. I want to add interactivity to these buttons, so that when I click stops, it stops. When I click start, it starts. When I click reset, it actually resets. So I'll come here, and that is the first thing I'll do. I will access those elements I need. So the first one I'll say, so you can create a variable using two ways, the let and the const keyword. So let is like you can be able to manipulate the values. For example, with that cookie container, you can be able, maybe once the cookies are done, you can maybe put cornflakes or cereal. But with a const, you cannot be able to manipulate the values. You cannot be able to change what you have already stored in there. It's a constant. But let gives you an opportunity to be able to manipulate it. So I'm going to use let here, and I'm going to say timer display. So this is the name of my memory location. So like you have a jar that you call cookie jar, now I am calling this memory location timer display. And then I'll say document. The moment I use the word document, I mean the HTML document. And then I tell it query select. So what I am saying is I want you to access an element in my HTML using this name that has this name. So you can use either the class name or you can use the ID name. It does not matter. So these elements, we had given them class names, and others we had given we had given them class names specifically because of CSS. However, when you're working with JavaScript, it is good practice to use IDs unless it is very necessary for you to use CSS class names. So I will go ahead and add ID names. Sorry, I don't know why I'm mixing up the two. I'll go ahead and add class ID names to this so that I can access them from the JavaScript side. So I can even give them the same name, timer display. It's just good when you're using JavaScript to access it using an ID. And then here we have an ID of stop button. And then here we have an ID of start button. So it might seem repetitive, but if I was doing this on my own project, maybe I wouldn't. But because I'm trying to teach you on, or I'm trying to guide you on how to go about JavaScript, it's important that I set an example. So so for the timer display, we have an ID of timer display. So whenever you have an ID, first after writing query selector, you put it in quotation mark. If you have an ID, you write hashtag. So you write timer display. Timer display. And then I will come here now and say let stop button is equals to document dot query selector. So that should be in capital. So stop button is also just has stop button. I think I did put a capital B. Yes, stop button. So the next is start and reset button. So what I can do is I can just copy this. Let me put a semicolon at the end, just good practice as well. And now here it's written stop, and just write start. And where it's written here stop, I just write start as well. Put a semicolon at the end, paste it. This will be reset. And then here just write reset. So what this has allowed me is I have now been able to get those elements that I need. And if I want to confirm that I actually have the correct element, it's normally good to console log. So console allows you to be able to see the display, the results in the console. So I will start with first line 2. So here you console log the variable name that has those values. If somebody tells you, hey, grab me that cookie container, you'll bring it with all its contents. So that's literally what we are doing. And let me first refresh so that it picks up the changes and inspect. So if I inspect and I go to where it's written console, I'll see it shows me script.js line 2. It shows me the HTML code that has the display, or that has the ID timer display. So you can do the same to all of them to make sure that you are on the right track. It's usually good, especially when you're learning, to just double check, especially from the JavaScript side. The other thing is I will create another variable known as millisecond. This will allow me to store the millisecond value. I'll just give this a 0. I'll do the same for, let's, seconds. I think I can write second. Let me just write seconds is equals to 0. And then I will write let minutes to be is equals to 0. So what I'm doing is I am first giving the initial values to be 0, 0, 0. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function. So remember, in programming, a function is a code that executes a particular result. If I write a function that set an alarm at 10 a.m., I expect that alarm to always go off at 10 a.m. because I have written a particular code or set of instructions that allow me to get a specific result. So here we are going to write a function for our timer. So I'm going to write start timer. So this is how we write a function. So there are different ways you can write a function in JavaScript. This is how you write a function in JavaScript, by the way. There are different ways you can write a function in JavaScript. You can use what we call an arrow function, a function declaration, and a function expression. This is a function declaration. So the first thing I'll say is the milliseconds should add by 1. You can write it like this, or you can write it like this. That means add by 1. Or you can say millisecond is equals to millisecond plus 1. There are so many ways you can write that. So for ease, we can just write plus plus, and you will see us doing this. So anytime we write plus plus, we mean add by 1. So we have said plus plus, so we'll say if milliseconds is equals to 100, what do we want it to do? We say millisecond. So what am I doing here? So I am asking myself, how many milliseconds make a second? So you can type here, or you can tell me in the chat section how many milliseconds make a second. So we see actually it's 1,000 milliseconds make a second. So we can come here and we can say if the millisecond is equals to 1,000, say the millisecond is equals to 0, and the seconds, I should not have deleted, I should just have deleted the E only, to increase by 1. So we say anytime the milliseconds is 1,000, increase the seconds now by 1. And then we go ahead and we say if, so how many seconds make a minute? 60. So you can come here and say seconds, 60, right? Let me confirm. Oh my God, if my teacher was to find me Googling how many seconds make a minute. How many seconds make a minute? 60. Great. By the way, I don't even know why I have Googled that. So if seconds is equals to 60, what do you want it to do? I want it now, I want the minute, I want the second first to be is equals to 0. This should be to be is equals to 0, and the minutes to increment by 1. Okay, and then we continue like that. So remember, our stopwatch is currently on milliseconds, seconds, and minutes. So if you even wanted to add a part for 1 hour, you can just go ahead and add. And now you'll say if minutes is equals to 60, make it 1 hour. Okay, so that is something you can try out on your own. So now we can come ahead and say let millisecond. So I'll say millisecond string. So this is this is what our users see. So how do we want our information to be communicated? So we say is equals to milliseconds. So what I'm trying to do here is I want, if the seconds are less than 10, to show 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, not to show 1, 2, 3. I just wanted to show 0, 1, and so forth. So to make that possible, I'll ask, we call this a ternary operator, where we say millisecond is less than 10. So it's like asking, is the millisecond less than 10? If it is less than 10, you use backticks, don't use quotation marks. Backticks are on your keyboard next to number 1. For those who are using, hopefully, but mostly it's usually at the top, just next to your number 1, you'll find it. So I'll say 0, and then I'll call what we call interpolation. Interpolation is using a value that you have already written. So here I'll come and say millisecond, and then I will say if it is greater than 10, then just show the millisecond as it is. What I hope you guys are understanding. So we are saying if the value, when the timer starts, if the value is less than 10, show 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09. Once you get to 10, just show it now without the 0. Just show 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that is what I have done here. So I've asked it, is a millisecond less than 10? Okay, if it is, add a 0, then the value of the millisecond. Else, just show the millisecond as it is. So I'll do the same now for the other. So I'll say let seconds string to be is equals to seconds. If it is to ask, is seconds less than 10? If it is, add a backtick. So for every value, add a 0. Using string interpolation, show the seconds, and then full colon, show the seconds. Like that. So we do the same. Let minute string. So if you had for hours, now you will continue like that. Minute string to be is equals to minutes. If it is less than 10, what do we want it to do? We want it to, I have to use the $sign so that it references that value. So I'll say minutes dot minutes. Yeah, so we are done with our function. So we now have to show it where it needs to be displayed. So I'll say, remember, I want it to display inside timer display, the element that has timer display. And this timer display, we stored it in JavaScript, we stored it in a variable known as timer display with a capital D. So I'll come here and I will scroll down and I will say timer display dot inner HTML, so that it shows inside the HTML is equals to, let's say $sign. I'll say minutes string and then full colon, do the same So whenever you want to reference a variable you have already created, this is how you do it, and we call that string interpolation. Another full colon. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I had a network hitch. So let us finalize this project. So we have now been able to add the functionality for showing our for displaying. Oh, sorry, this should not be closed like this. It should be closed at the beginning and at the end, not in each and every part. So what I mean is your opening backtick should be here and your closing backtick should be here at the end. Okay, so the next thing now we are going to do is we won't see much change here yet because we need to be able to add the code for starting and stopping. So that is what we need to do first. So I'll come here to do next, I mean. So I'll say I'll first create what we call a new variable that will allow us to track if there is any time lapse, if time is actually it's moving here. So that's the first thing we'll do. So we'll come and say time interval ID is equals to null. So when there is no, like right now, that there is nothing here, we can just write null so that it's just easier. So and then we say now we got the variable start button here that stores our start button HTML elements. So this element, so remember now we are accessing this top button, start button, and reset. So we stored them in different variables. So that is what I am trying to capture. So I'll come here and I'll say start button dot, should be capital B. Wait, is it capital B or it's small? Okay. So it should be like that. So you first get that variable and then you say add event listener. So remember, I in the previous videos I've talked about event listeners in JavaScript. So event listeners basically listen in on the actions of the website user or visitor. So there are different types of event listeners. Like right now, I can go on YouTube and click a video to play. That is an event listener. There is a play button that is waiting for me to click on that video, and so forth and so forth. So we have to add an event listener to these buttons so that once that event listener is clicked or is activated, a specific code runs. So here I am going to use the click event. So there are different types of events, and some even can be on mouse over or stuff like that. And then now I'm going to write my function because I want something specific or a particular set of instructions to be executed whenever I click on that button. So I'll say if time interval ID is not equal to null. If there is actually a value, what do I want it to do? I want it to come ahead and say click clear interval time interval ID. Let me explain what this time clear interval do, because at least you know this time interval is a variable I have created here. So in JavaScript, there are two, we call them JavaScript methods, one known as the set interval and the clear interval. So the set interval is used to track a time lapse, like something like, like if you watch like you see how, what am I typing? Okay, here it is. You see how if you go on YouTube, if you have watched a video for 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 30 minutes or the whole video or how many minutes you have remaining, that is because there is a set interval that repeatedly called. So this is the function, this is set interval method of the window interface, repeatedly calls a function or executes a code snippet with a fixed time delay on each call. So it tries to track the time that is passing by. Like I can see on this live, I'm being shown that I have been live for 1 hour, 17 minutes and 42 seconds. And then after that, I can come and have what we call close interval. Clear interval, not close interval, clear interval. Okay, it's okay. We can just find it here. So the clear interval is just to clear. It's like it restarts that time. So whenever you want to restart that time, you clear the interval. So even in our stopwatch, there is whatever is storing how long you have been on something is the set time. But when you want to restart that stopwatch, you use the clear time, the clear interval. So I'll tell it if it is not null and I click the start button, clear the interval. But if it is null, store the value. So I'll come here and I'll say time interval is equals to, now we store the value, set interval, wait, what has happened? It has added its own things. Set capital interval, set interval into brackets. So I'll put the start timer function because we want it to track that time, and then I'll say update after every, you can say after every 10 milliseconds. Let us see what will happen. Yeah, let us see. I click on the stopwatch, let me refresh, and I click start. So we see it has now started uploading the information. So once it gets to 1,000, it should come to the second. You see now so this has started again. So but now I cannot be able to stop or reset. So let me work on those. So I'll come here and now I'll click on the stop. I'll call the stop variable that stores our stop button. So remember we defined it here at the top, stop button. So I'll say stop button and I'll also add an event listener, and I will say that event listener to be click, and I'll say I want it to be a function, and then I'll say clear. So anytime we are clicking on the stop button, we're just saying clear the interval, like clear whatever I am seeing, clear interval time, interval ID. So we want it to clear the time that has been stored here in the start button. So if I refresh and I click start, so if I want to stop, that should be able to stop the timer from continuing to record the value. So let us now work on the reset. So when you click on it, it restarts the timer afresh. So I'll come here and now I'll pick the reset button. So the reset is this button that we created this variable here. So I'll say reset button dot add event listener is going to be click. I'm going to add a function of what I want it to do. Sorry about this text that is appearing there. So the function, and then I'm going to say, first of all, if I click reset, clear the interval as well. And then the next thing I want it to do is now to store those values. So I'll come here and I'll say timer display. This timer display is what we had captured here as a timer display, which is what is here. So I'll come here and I'll say a timer display to be dot inner HTML is equals to 00 full colon 00 full colon 00. Okay, so we want it to reset that value, and then we also now want the values that are there, the millisecond to be equal to 0 and the second to be equal to 0 as well, and the minutes to be equal to 0. So the reason I'm writing this without writing the word let is because I had already created these variables here. So once you create a variable once, you no longer need to create it over and over again, you just use it. However, I could not use this let milliseconds because these ones are inside a function. So these variables are just created outside a function. They are created outside independently, so I can use them anywhere in the code. But any variable you create inside a function can only be used inside that function. So these variables, let millisecond string, second string, have been created inside the start timer function. So we cannot use them anywhere else. But anything else, we can use it. Even this let timer interval ID, we have been able to use it in all these other functions because we have created it outside a function. So if we go to our stopwatch now, let us see if everything now works. If I click start, it's starting successfully. If I click stop, it stops. If I click reset, it changed that to 0. So yeah, we have been able to create our own stopwatch using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I would really challenge you or encourage you to go ahead and also do this code, have your own colors, have your own font, so that you can be able to understand what we have actually done. So see you tomorrow in our session, same time, and we are also going to be building another project. So bye bye.